Hello and well met. This is Laren with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to do some character creation using the Fantasy Grounds Unity platform, the most recent edition with all the new changes, plus the Monsters of the Multiverse accessory module, and of course the updated and revised character wizard that has been growing since they released it. I'm going to give it a try. I always try it out before I make any negative comments or anything. So I want to make sure that the tool is going to work, especially if you have new players. So I'm going to try this out, see how it goes. So first things first, in my library on the right-hand side, in the modules area, I have a lot of different modules loaded, but as you can see, I have the main core books for D&D, including the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. I have Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. I have the Salt Marsh. I have the new Monsters of the Multiverse Players Guide. I have Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, Tomb of Annihilation, Van Richten's Guide, and Xanathar's Guide. So all the other books have been replaced by the Monsters of the Multiverse in the sense of character creation. Now the lore has changed, but the character creation part has been sort of taken over or taken care of by this content. So I don't have to load like the Elemental Evil and the Tortle package or anything like that. Now this assumes that you have at least a standard license in the content. If you are just a player and you need to connect to another game master or host, you may or may not have access to these depending on what they've shared. But for the most part, I have most of the core books loaded for backgrounds and such, and then most of the races are covered in Monsters of the Multiverse, except for the core races, which are in the Player's Handbook. So I just wanted to get that out there. The other thing is the character wizard has been changing and evolving over time. It is something that has been buggy in the past, so if you run across any errors, report it on the official Fantasy Grounds forums in the thread for the House of Healing for Unity. There is a specific posted sticky thread there for character problems. So you want to collect your logs if you can and state your issue. Let them know your computer system, what version of Fantasy Grounds you're using, and of course your rule set. So that's important to report these so that we can get the bugs squished and get them taken care of. So the next thing is I'm going to start building a character. So there are two ways you can build a character for the 5th edition rule set. So if I open up the character area over here on the right, you have all these tools. If you open up actually the player, you'll see that there's characters. And you'll see a list. It might be blank or it might be other characters in there depending on what table you're on. But if you click on the character wizard, that brings that tool up, or you can click on the green plus button and use the old drag and drop method. So those are the two different ways to create characters. So I'm going to use the character wizard. So if I click on that, it should bring up the character stat block or the character sheet. And at this point, you're faced with starting off with your stats. It's got a green check mark by it because it thinks it's satisfied because it already has plugged in the standard array. So if you just want to use a standard array, that's what it starts with. So I think I'm going to do that for time's sake. So I want to build a spellcaster, probably a bard, because they have a lot of things to them. A lot more utility, a lot more things you got to go through. So I'm going to go ahead and switch around my stats. So this 15, I'm going to use the arrow keys to push it all the way to the end for this slot, which is the charisma. This 8, I'm going to bring that over to strength because I don't think the bard needs to be super strong. I'm going to leave the dexterity at 14. I'm going to move the con over to intelligence for 13 and leave the con there, and then keep the wisdom at 10. So I just kind of move the stats around a little using these arrows. Now the next thing I'm going to do is take and grab the race. So once you click on races, this will be populated with whatever content you have loaded. So like I said, most of those races that came from other sources have been put in the Monsters of the Multiverse, so you don't have to load as many books. The main difference is the way that the information's organized a little different. and the content regarding the lore and where they came from and that sort of thing has changed. So I'm going to go ahead and pick something a little bit more complex than just a human. Maybe a half-elf because they get an extra ability, or maybe a human variant, or even a custom lineage, because those are things that have been typically problematic with the character wizard, but I think they've got most of those problems related to that straightened out. So let's go with the half-elf. And as you choose the half-elf, you have some choices here. So you can pick you get +1, and you get 2 choices. So we get to add +1 to any of these different scores. So I'm going to add 1 to dexterity, and I'm going to add 1 to intelligence. That takes care of that problem, or that actual requirement. And then you get to pick a proficiency, which would be related to your race. So I'm going to go with probably survival. And that takes care of that. And then you get 1 other. So probably, let's go with stealth. Okay, so there's 2 that we got from our racial things. And then you get to pick a language. So he already has Common and Elvish. So I'm going to go with Sylvan. And that takes care of those requirements. Once you've done all that, you'll see the little green check mark. Now, this also means that you've satisfied for this race, but if you wanted to go back and change something, you can at this point. You can actually select another race and then go through this process again. But if you hit commit, that's when it actually saves the data, and you pretty much are stuck with your choices. You have to start over or edit your character sheet manually. So I want to go to class now. And when I do that, I want to take the class and go ahead and select the class. So I said Bard because I wanted a little bit more complexity. And we get to pick 2 proficiencies for the Bard, or 3 actually. They're musical instruments. So let's go with, these are for tools. So he's going to know how to use the lyra proficiently. He's going to know how to use a flute. And I'm going to go with a drum. So he's got 3 different instruments. And now we have a choice of skill proficiency. So I want to do acrobatics. I want to do performance and maybe persuasion. Yeah, so those are my 3 main skills that I got from the class. And once you've done that, you'll see it's satisfied. Now I'm going to go to background. And I'm going to pick one of these. I'm going to go with entertainer since that's the closest. But we might end up getting some duplication of skills. So that's something I wanted to show. So if I pick entertainer, I'm going to get some skills that are already chose from my class. So it's going to make this to where I have to choose something else. So instead of persuasion or performance in this case, I think I'm going to go with perception, and that will satisfy that again. For the classes, and then I got 1 other one I have to pick, so probably insight. So those are the different skills that I've chose for my class, and I had to go back and reselect some because there's some duplication there. When you use the old drag and drop method, it didn't prevent you from duplicating. This sort of helps with that. And now I get to pick 1 other instrument of my choice, so I'm going to go with a lute. It's pretty common for a bard. And now for the inventory. So if you miss the step at level 1, this option goes away, and you'll have to manually add your equipment. So I'm going to take the Entertainer's Pack, which comes with a variety of things related to the profession or the class. And then I get a class choice 1 for my weapon. So I'm definitely going to pick a rapier. And then I get another class choice of an actual instrument to carry and to use. So I'm going to get the lute. And then I get 1 other instrument, so probably a flute. So those are the class choices, the background choices for the starting equipment. As I had said before, if you miss that or you don't pick those in the beginning, this won't be available and you'll have to go back later. So if you're making like a level 3 character and you forget to do the equipment, you can always go back later and add it in the manual method. But the only time this really comes up is at level 1, so just keep that in mind. If you don't like your choices, you can reset the equipment, and then you can also go into a purchase equipment mode where you can buy things based off of the starting goal that you have instead of getting the starting equipment. I don't need to do that, but I just wanted you to be aware of that. You can do it that way too. So if you get starting equipment, or you can get the treasure, the gold, or both, depends on your game master and your table. So now that I'm done with inventory, I'm going to go back to the starting equipment. So we're pretty much satisfied. We got leather and a dagger, and we have rapier. So that's a pretty good start. Now I want to go to spells. So this is where you're going to pick your cantrips and such. So it defaults to Bard because that's the class I am. I get 2 cantrips. So I want to get, let's see, I want to do probably Cutting Words. And Mage Hand was probably one of them. So I'm going to pick Mage Hand. You click this little down arrow. It populates here. And then let's go, actually Prestidigitation would be good. So those are the 2 cantrips that I get for first level. And then if I click on the level 1 spells, now it says I can have up to 4, but I think you can only prepare up to 2 or something like that. So I'm going to go with, let's see, Charm Person, Command, Cure Wounds, which is always helpful in case you don't have a healer or the healer goes down. And then let's go with Fairy Fire. So those are some utility spells. Not too much offense there, but very utility. So that's kind of how bards are anyways. So now we go to feats, and there are no feats because this is the specific character that I'm building didn't qualify for any feats, so there won't be any there. It just kind of checks that at the end. So I'm just going to type Bard. I'm going to take it up to level 3. So I'm just going to say Bard level 3, and I'll say Half Elf. So that way, if I look at this character later on, I'll know what it is, and I'll have a better idea of what it's going to actually consist of. So once I hit the commit button, that's when you're kind of stuck with what your choices are. And you can see on the left, it added all of the different things that were available. So it lists out all the different things that were added. At this point, I would go through and look at some of your stuff, make sure that it was all added. Looks like all my skills were added. You look at your actual features and traits and that sort of thing. Looks like that's all there. Yep, languages and all your proficiencies. So then you go to your inventory, kind of get an idea of what's going on there. Looks like I have most everything here that I picked, which is fine. Your notes can come later, and then you have your actions tab where you're going to be doing a lot of your most of your stuff that you're going to be when you're playing. So I want to go and put 1 here for dagger for the ammo. And then if you change the mode to preparation and actions, combat and actions, this is what it looks like when you're going to play. When you want to prepare spells, you go into preparation mode, and you can go to summary, or you can go to group. And then you click on the metadata, and for prepared spells, we can change that to 4. And that will list the spells out. So when we're in preparation mode, we can actually select these, which will allow us to prepare these spells. And then when you go to combat and actions, the little star here indicates which spells are prepared, including your cantrips and your bardic inspiration. So that is just the kind of the very beginning of that. Once you've got through first level, I do recommend that you or your GM makes a copy. So before I do anything, I'm going to pick a portrait. There are some new portrait that comes with monsters of the multiverse. So if you click on the bag here for your character portrait selection, there are some more newer portraits that if you can use if you want. I'm going to pick some kind of half elf maybe. I'll have to take a look, see what's available. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, so I'm just going to pick something that looks somewhat elvish. Here we go. And then when you do this in your actual character manager under characters, if your GM gives you OK, you can go ahead and make a copy of this. So all you have to do is drag and drop it. And now you have a copy of this character. And the reason I do that is in case something breaks, you'll have a backup. So you want to do this before you actually level up again. So I have a copy of my first level character just in case. And I'll do this for every level. So that way, even though I have a bunch of copies, I'll have a copy at different levels. So this is actually level 1. So I want to change this. The current copy I'm working on is actually going to be level 3. So that would be my backup for level 1. So now what I'm going to do is go into the class and level, which is this little magnifying glass next to proficiency bonus. Open this up, and then I want to go and click on the level up button. All that stuff will disappear, brings up the character wizard. Here you have increased level, so you're just going to go up 1, and that increases the levels. It's going to check for feats again, which there are none, and if you have any spells you will need to add at this point, you can. So it looks like I've gained the ability to have 5 spells now instead of just 3. So I can potentially add at least another spell here, so I might do that, but I'm going to save my other spell for like level 2 or level 3. So I'm going to go with Vicious Mockery. So I'll add that to my repertoire here. And then that's actually a cantrip, so I want to actually get rid of that. I didn't want to go with a cantrip. Okay, so cantrips available. We want to go to level 1. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and grab, let's see, let's do Bane, because that helps a lot. So you can go through and pick your spells according to what your maximum number is. So now I have up to 5 spells. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, and that's it. So you don't have to do a whole lot for that level because there's not much going on. So I'm going to hit commit. And then when I'm ready to get started to play, if I go to the Actions tab, I can see now that I have Bane here as a spell. And then there is Jack of All Trades, which was added. And then Song of Rest, which was added. So those are other effects or actions. And then if I go to my preparations for preparing spells, now I got 5 of them if that's what's allowed. And then go back to combat and action. So that's the very minor changes in between levels. And now for the 3rd level, it's going to be different because I'm going to pick my college at this point. So if I go back to the main tab, and let's say it's time to level up to level 3, I'll go back to the character wizard. So go to the level up button again, and then increase to level 3. And now you get to pick an expertise. So I want to be an expertise in performance, and I want to be an expert in acrobatics. And now I have to pick a college. So I'm going to do the College of Swords. I always like that college. And then I'm going to click on feats again. There's no feats to be had, so it'll just satisfy that. If I go to spells, now I can have up to 6 spells, and now I have level 2 spells. So I saved a slot so I can have at least 1. So I'll go with Heat Metal, I think. Yeah, I'll go with Heat Metal. That seems to be good. Or Shatter. So maybe I'll do Shatter. So those are my spells that I have. And now once that's finished, I'll hit commit. And it saves whatever changes were made. And if you go back to your inventory, you have this Blade Flourish now, which comes from your college. And you get a fighting style. So depending on which fighting style you choose, you have your cantrips, your spells, and here's Shatter. So if I go to the preparation mode, I can actually prep that. And you can see it says 4 and 2 to be ready. So I'm going to unready maybe Command or something like that, or actually Charm. So that's what basically those are the spell slots that I have available. And then I just turn it back to combat and actions. And now this character is pretty much ready to go. So that probably took me a whole 30 minutes maybe at the most. I wasn't timing myself, but basically that's what you want. It's kind of quick. It's not too bad. Doesn't take forever. Like I said, if you forget to do your equipment at first level, you can always come back later and adjust your inventory. So right now I have a backpack, a bedroll. So I'm going to locate all of the items that I don't want to have readily available, like the costume and the candles and disguise kit, all that stuff's going to go in my backpack, including the flute. The leather I'm actually wearing. The loot will be tied to the backpack. Rapier is being used. Rations will go to the backpack, and the water skin. So anything that is loose that you're going to be using, or like a weapon or something, those would be equipped, except for you can just have your pouch carried here in this case. If you wanted to store something in your pouch, you can type pouch next to it if you want. So these are just some of the options that you have when you're going to organize your inventory. And then down below is your gold. So that's pretty cool. Fantasy Grounds now keeps track of gold weight. So if you have a bunch of gold, that's going to add up eventually. There's an option in the Fantasy Grounds interface for GMs. They can set that to whether it counts or not, because before they didn't have it on, so it wasn't an option. So that's basically it. So if you're a player and you're getting ready to play, I usually set this character up on the right-hand side of the combat tracker. So I'll just bring that up right now, the combat tracker. And if you are a player, your GM has to put your character on this combat tracker. You can't do it yourself. The actual game master has to do that. And that would just be him dragging your portrait and putting you on the combat tracker. And then if you have any particular skills that are constant, like this Jack of all trades is one of them. So that would be something that you get a +1 on initiative. All the other ones are kind of situational, so I don't need to enable those. And then on the front page, I would take the initiative roll, drag it to the hotkeys below, and then a couple of my skills, or just so I don't have to keep coming back here. So I'm going to do perception. And then I'm going to do probably stealth. Those are probably going to be my top 2 or 3. One other thing, if you look at your abilities and you go to your Jack of all trades, you get to add half proficiency to every skill that you don't already have a bonus or proficiency. So if I go to my skills, every single one of these skills is going to be set to a half proficiency. So if you click about 5 times, you'll get to the half star here. So this doesn't count for ones that you already have proficiency in. So these are just skills that you have a little bit of expertise in, but not too much. More like a little familiarity. That's where the Jack of all trades comes in. So you get to have half of a proficiency, or half of your proficiency bonus rounded up. So it's pretty handy to be a bard. They're pretty skill savvy. So I'm just going through and adding the half proficiency manually. It doesn't do it automatically. But if you have that trait, the Jack of all trades, this is what it looks like. So there's all that. If you want to add any instruments here, you can. So if you wanted to do a specific type of performance, you could do that. So I'm just manually adding the instruments that I have in case I use them. So there was a flute, there was a drum, there was one other, I don't remember, but I'm going to go ahead and make myself proficient with those, because you actually have proficiency in those instruments. And then I'm going to change this to charisma, because it's more based on that. As far as performance goes, it could potentially be for a drum, maybe it's dexterity, but for the rest of them, you can put expression into it and kind of make that. So there's the drum, the flute, the instrument. We wanted that to be not instrument, but we wanted to say it was was the guitar thing. Keep forgetting the lute and lute, flute, lyra. Okay, there we go. So we have a lute, and I'm going to add the lyra. There we go. So there's your charisma for that. And then looks like everything else is done. The flute can be based on your charisma. It's basically up to you and your DM what you want it to do. So this is like a fully created character. I mean, it's not just building a character. You put your alignment here, so this person would be chaotic good, just by the nature of it. It's male. Doesn't really think of a deity right off, but if you want to do your personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws, you can make up your own. Or if you pull up your background, in this case, this is an entertainer background. So if you do that, you bring up your notes. You can bring up these tables down below at the bottom. So first I want to find out the routine. So we'll see. I'm going to roll on this table to find out what their main routine is. So 7 is a poet. So this one actually does poetry. And then for the actual personalities, you can get 2 of these. So I'm just going to roll on the table. And if you notice, I can drag and drop the text from the chat window or from the table itself. So this first one I rolled is, I love a good insult, even one directed at me. That's pretty cool. I like that. Somebody that's humble, that's not going to get all bent out of shape. And whenever I come to a new place, I collect local rumors and spread gossip. That sounds like our boy here. And then you just go down these tables and add. So he's like tradition, beauty, creativity is probably the one that he's more into for that particular ideal. And then the bond kind of keeps him grounded. My instrument is my most treasured possession, and it reminds me of someone I love. So that could be a good thing. And then as far as flaws go, let's see what this person is. I'll do anything to win fame and renown. I'm a sucker for a pretty face. So yeah, he's a lover boy. So he's definitely enamored with women. Okay, so that's just just a brief background. You can add your appearance. You can add more notes if you want. If you play an adventure league, that's what this tab is for. So you can actually click on the plus button to add a new log. You can say this is your AD or AL adventure 1 or whatever, your first adventure. You open that link up, you can actually put more details here, and you keep track of all your particulars, like your session date, the DCI number, all that good stuff. And then again, with the actions tab, this is where all the magic happens. So if you're going to be playing, this is where you're going to spend a majority of your time, which is why I implied to put down some of your roles down here for shortcuts, so you don't have to keep going to the different tabs all the time. So this helps with that. I mean, it's not perfect. And just remember that if your proficiency bonus goes up, or your skills go up, or your stats like dexterity or charisma goes up, the bonuses will change the rolls, so you'll have to re-drag your shortcuts, because these shortcuts, once they're dragged down here, they're permanent. They don't actually level up with your character. So if your initiative goes up, you need to re-drag it to there. And the only way you're going to know that is just paying attention when you build your character. All right, I think that's enough. I've added some extras there in the end, and if you need more coding and automation, you'll have to work with your DM on that, or learn how to do it yourself, or you can buy some third-party content, which will do a little bit more of the automation. But it looks like they're adding some of that in by default, so a lot of this you don't have to change or do anything at all. So in this case, it has most of these things. The only thing I had to do manually is pick my spells, which is obvious. It can't predict which spells you want. And then I also had to add the half proficiency to my skills. But other than that, most of the other things are in here. You have this fighting style, which is kind of like a dueling fighting. So if you go to your abilities, you go to fighting styles, you can pick dueling or 2-weapon fighting. So I actually have dueling, and that's what this coding is for. So if you were going to use your weapon in the manner that it states, you can actually enable that as well, as long as you're using 1 weapon and no shield or something like that. So if you click on that, that adds that ability also, so you get an extra bonus on melee damage for 2 points of extra damage. So there we go. That is the majority of the character. I hope this helps. Again, if you were going to level up, which I didn't make a copy of it, the second level, but if you're going to do this in a campaign and you don't want something bad to happen, make a copy of it before you level up. That way you can always go back and start from there instead of going all the way to the beginning. So you can imagine if you're at level 7 and something goes wrong, you have to rebuild that entire character, at least the abilities and the skills and such. You can take your equipment and drag that over to the new character, but some of the stuff that you have on here, you'll have to redo. So take care, everyone. Have a good weekend. Happy Friday.